Welcome to the Dialogue KE. Now, they say the more things change, the more they stay the same. In 2 days' time, it will be exactly 1 year since we went to the polls to elect new leaders. 1 year down the line, the electoral body IBC is not fully constituted. As we speak, the constituents of Banisa in Mandera County are not represented in the National Assembly after the seat fell vacant following the death of Kulo Maalim Hassan. At the same time, the government and the opposition are set to begin fresh bipartisan talks this Wednesday to solve the political stalemate. Will the talks be successful this time round? To help us dissect these matters of national interest, I'm joined by Justina Wamai, a 2022 presidential running mate, and Mudhiora Kariara, the party leader of TGN.
And you should also add a 2017 presidential running mate.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, before we begin the discussion, allow me to pick your brains regarding the Finance Act court battle. Yeah. Do you think that the government will be successful in this?
I believe that our courts are competent to deal with this matter. Talking about the outcome at this point would be sub judice, so to speak. So far, I would say the courts have handled themselves well from the time the petition was lodged all the way to the orders that were given today. So I have full confidence that the court will apply itself diligently as far as this matter is concerned. So let's just wait and see how it goes.
All right. Justina, do you support the Finance Act, and do you think the government will have their way in this?
I never supported it from the onset because what were Kenyans saying? They did not want a house to sleep in. They wanted industries to work in. But now the voice of the Kenyans got lost in all this. And what will the government? Is the government benefiting? Yes. They're going to cut twice what they were supposed to tax last month. They're taxing this month. So I think the government will continue doing what they're doing until the court says not to, or to continue doing it.
All right.
Yes.
Let's shift focus now to the main discussion of tonight. I mean, Mudhiora, as a country, we seem to be in a political deja vu. We found ourselves in this situation after every election. Talks of electoral reforms. Why are we always in this cycle each and every time?
First and foremost, I believe it's because the players have never been sincere. They have never indulged in this process or approached with clean hands. I will take us back to how the previous commission was formed, for instance. Back then, we had the handshake where the supposed official opposition leader, Raila Amolo Odinga, got a handshake and used the back door to get into government. So him, together with the former president Uhuru Kenyatta, handpicked who the commissioners were for the election that happened in 2022. So instead of the opposition working on a process that would be all-inclusive, just because they were included and had a say, did not see the need to do the right thing. And therefore, just like we have bipartisan talks now, the two parties agreed on a commission then. It's unfortunate that the outcome of the election as declared by that commission did not favor those who had handpicked the commission, which is a lesson for us all. But then it goes to show that those who are involved in the process usually do it pulling towards themselves, hoping that they will benefit from the spoils, when that's not how this should be approached. According to our constitution, the process should be all-inclusive. It should be independent. It should be free of any special interests. But that has never quite happened.
All right, Justina, you are so active in the last election. You're actually a presidential running mate. Each and every, after 5 years, after every election, we come back to these talks, bipartisan talks, whatever we call them. Why do we, as a country, always find ourselves in this situation?
Sadly, the same players who have always been there are the same ones. So I feel like the bad economy, the fact that there's no money, they're afraid to survive in the economy that they have messed up. We are surviving in this economy. Our bills are not being paid by government, but the ones who have been given the task to at least give us policies that are making sense to the economy, don't do it. But again, they want to run away from the struggles and have their bills paid by the taxpayers or the exchequer. But I think I'm going to challenge Kenyans who feel that we need change in terms of leadership. If you feel that you have the vision to get this country forward, kindly 2027, get yourself out there. It doesn't matter whether you have money or not. Just go out there and give Kenyans an alternative. Because remember, 8 million Kenyans never voted in the last election. So it goes to say that there's somewhat voter apathy because Kenyans do not have options of better leadership. So let's change the game by having more of us and more Kenyans with a vision in taking this country forward.
Yeah, Mutiora.
Yeah.
I mean, why do we see a lot of hard stance between the two sides?
It's because the matter begins in an election that was hotly contested. Yes, in a democracy, it doesn't matter by what votes the winner was declared, as long as you met the threshold, which in our case was a 50% plus one, and you got a majority of votes above 25% in at least half of the counties. So we have a split nation where the two protagonists got almost equal votes. The difference was only 233,000 votes. So I would say they feel that, okay, now for the for the case of the president, because he was declared the winner, he feels he should be respected. His mandate, as per the constitution, demands that those who lost in that election concede and proceed to discharge their duties as of the position they hold, which in this case is the minority party in the National Assembly and even in the Senate. So I would say this, in the slang language, ni kutoheshimiana.
Not respecting each other.
Yes. And it shouldn't be such. We are still a fledgling democracy trying to get there. We haven't gotten there yet where we will get into an election and people will concede even if they've lost by the smallest of margins. But the biggest problem we have is that our elections are never free, are never fair, are never credible.
What do you mean when you say the elections are never free, they're never fair?
Well, I started by mentioning that we went into the 2022 election using a commission that was handpicked by players in the game. That in itself makes the process prejudiced against those who did not have that influence then.
But some will argue that there are other elective posts, but only the presidential post that is so contested that many say that it's not fair, but other positions, actually, people accept the results.
The reason we have spotlights in the presidential race is because the resources deployed at that level are sufficient to have that spotlight. Otherwise, if people had resources to follow up on how elections are conducted at the civic level, parliamentary, senatorial, gubernatorial, we would see whatever cracks there are therein. Because the truth is, our elections are far from what we envisioned them to be. You remember the procurement process waited until very late in the day. The materials, even in some of the stations, arrived too late. In some instances, we had election materials being destroyed. You mentioned about Banisa not having a member of parliament, and nearby there was a constituency where the returning officer was shot. So there were incidents of insecurity as well. So when all these is put together, you can see that the environment is not conducive for an election that is free and fair. And let me just take you back to a point that most people like to forget. Our current president started campaigning immediately after the 2017 election. Nobody flagged that as an electoral malpractice. He used state resources. And then later on, when his co-protagonist, Raila Odinga, started to campaign, he had the support of the regime then, and he used state resources. Now, if the race was to be fair for everyone, if you ask me, these two should have been disqualified straight up because they were not playing according to the rules of the game. So there are those who would want to say it's the best election we could have had, but I think the playing field has not been level.
So the playing field is not level.
No, it's not.
Well, these talks between Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, there are a lot of hard stance. You know, some are saying that you do not want a handshake government, you know. Are these talks in good faith?
Sometimes you don't look at what someone is saying, you look at what they are not saying. I think Azimio want a handshake, but they are refusing, so that if it comes, it's not going to be their push. But I want to remind people in Kenya Kwanza that 2007, the president was in that same position of being a hardliner. He's the one who pushed Raila Amolo Odinga to get what he got from Kibaki. So I think it's his karma. He has to deal with it now. And he has no moral authority to tell us that he's not going to give Raila Amolo Odinga a handshake or whatever Raila Amolo Odinga wants. In fact, for me as an ordinary Kenyan, whose bills are not paid for by government, we demand that they settle this issue very fast so that we can continue working without feeling like they're pushing us. Additionally, there's something that Carrera has talked about. The way the ballot papers are not printed on time. The tragedy is that who is supposed to appropriate funding to IEBC? National Assembly. Who do we vote for? People who don't even go for committees, people who don't attend the sittings. ISO Petitions Committee was disbanded last week because they're even pending petitions by private citizens and even government. They're complaining that nothing is being done about it. I have a petition there to decriminalize industrial hemp or katani in Kiswahili, and there's no feedback from April. So what are we saying? When you're voting, irrespective whether it's the president or MCA, remember the role of these people is to influence policy. If it is health, education, food security, all those things, that is where they influence policy through legislation. So if we vote for people because one, Uhuru Kenyatta was testing Ruto, so to speak, what is your ideology? Why are you voting for someone? So all this blame for me, I'm going to apportion it to Kenyans because they're the ones who choose leaders without having a second thought. Finally, there's this argument that politicians have. Modera is saying that the current president started campaigning early enough. But remember, there are two terms that are used when you're registering a political party. Term one is popularizing your party. Term two is campaign. Campaign is when the 3 months that are declared by IEBC. So maybe they would argue that they were popularizing the party. But we know what they are doing. The guy was getting ground. And it is indicative right now to show that the current president is a political animal. He's a good politician. But when it comes to delivery, I think delivery is very boring because I don't understand. He already has the seat. What is he going to do? What is he doing in Central for 5 days? I mean, we were opening,
He's actually
launching projects that were launched by Uhuru Kenyatta. So I want to challenge government. Please be creative, be innovative, and also cut down your costs because they're telling us to tighten the belt, but then they're just continuing to be extravagant. So I think this politics is not taking this country in the right direction.
There's something she has said, and I would like to take it just a bit.
All right.
I stretch it if you allow me.
Oh, okay.
Our deputy president over the weekend mentioned that President Ruto is now the de facto Mount Kenya kingpin, as if he doesn't realize that William Ruto is already head of state and therefore kingpin for every region. He also mentioned that the region is behind him, both now and even in 2027. So she should just have come out and said they are campaigning again for the next election.
Do you actually think that this is a defense mechanism? Because you've seen the Azimio rallies. They go to talk to people on top of vehicles. You've seen the same thing with the president. Now that these talks are ongoing, do you think that it's too early for them to begin this?
It's very early, but I think the problem with this country is that the president and the government have not realized that they want the seat. No, Kenyans are going to judge you on delivery. The role of Azimio is to discredit government at this point. And Kenya Kwanza is helping them to discredit themselves. So I think what Kenya Kwanza should be doing is focusing on delivery.
Yeah.
So that when Kenyans say, you said nikieka Biblia chini, unga is going to be 100 shillings. That is the metrics you're judging him. When he said that you're going to do, he said so many things. In fact, he has said in 90 days, that is October, we're going to get a digital ID. I've not seen any process going on. So I feel like they are over-promising on top of other promises. And then sadly, they are going to give Azimio a head start because Azimio will tell them, guys, we told you these guys are not delivering, and they're not. So I think Kenya Kwanza is self-sabotaging themselves in joining Azimio in these campaigns. How I wish they'll do a Kibaki on us. Remember, we used to sit back and wonder, where is the president? Yes, we are feeling that the economy is working. We are seeing banks selling their loans, hawking their loans on the ground. So I wish we'd miss the president, not him all the time being on our faces. Let's miss him and say, anyway, we are feeling something. We don't necessarily need to see him.
Yeah. Back to the bipartisan talks.
Yeah.
Azimio began actually fighting for the high cost of living to come down.
Yeah.
But actually, we've seen the posts have actually changed.
Yeah.
It's now more about the electoral reforms. Why do you think that? Because many Kenyans actually lost their lives due to the protest. But right now, cost of living is not top of the agenda.
Well, what Azimio has been gunning for is relevance. They realized that they could use the cost of living card, and they've milked it so far. It got them to the table. Earlier on, you may recall, the Kenya Kwanza government was not keen on having any talks whatsoever.
Yeah.
But because cost of living galvanized Kenyans, and Azimio leading that realized that they could actually use it to push the government, that kept them going.
So it's not about Mwananchi.
It has never been. It has always been about the guys at the top. You remember when President Moi was doing his last term, Raila Odinga back then did a handshake with him. And then after the 2002 fallout, we had a referendum that got the then President Moi Kibaki and Raila Odinga falling out, which ended in the acrimonious 2007 elections. And back then, Raila Odinga was able again to get a handshake with President Moi Kibaki. You remember what happened during the 2018 handshake. So always we have victims, and these victims are ordinary Kenyans. In the last cycle, you remember we had Baby Mora, Baby Pendo, and a lot of other victims who lost their lives. Livelihoods were destroyed, property as well. We've never had justice. If Raila Odinga indeed was keen on fighting for the common folk, at least he would have fought for justice for those whose lives were lost back then. But he did not, yet he was very close to the presidency. People actually said, like Ruto was a co-president during Uhuru's first term, Raila Odinga was a co-president in Uhuru's second term. So if it was his agenda to deliver justice to the people, at least he should have begun with those who had contributed to him being welcomed at the table to do the handshake. But that has never been a priority. In July, you recall, journalists suffered heavily due to the violence and brutality by the police. We've not seen them use whatever tools and instruments at their disposal to seek justice for that. Over 30 lives were lost in July, according to a report that was done by Article 19. We've not seen them use their numbers in parliament to petition that the cabinet secretary in charge of interior to come and explain how this could have happened. At the moment, in the minority of Kenyans who believe that this government has failed on the premise that it has not been able to protect property and life, and on that basis it has no legitimacy to be in charge. These should be what they should be pushing right now. But instead, what we are hearing is they are back to the 2022 election. They are back to these other trivial matters that will not impact the high cost of living we're experiencing. Nobody's talking about the runaway debt. Nobody's talking about how our debt portfolio grows by almost 40 billion every time that our shilling depreciates by $1. These are the things that would impact Kenyans, that ordinary citizen. Yet, those who are supposed to be holding this government to account are not paying attention to that. They are basically chasing the rodent and letting the antelope run.
Some will argue that Kenya Kwanza government took most of their MPs to their side. They actually bought them off. And now this is actually a retaliatory act by the Azimio to go to the people and demonstrate. They did not have the numbers in parliament.
That's an excuse. As far as I am concerned, I know that if systems were allowed to run, if institutions were run or operated as is envisioned by our constitution, the political parties fund provides resources that parties can use for their operations. I don't remember the ODM party vigorously putting itself out there to make it a darling of the people, let alone the elected members who serve in its ranks. They've not been investing to make themselves as marketable as other players out there. So when Kenya Kwanza hoodwinks its MPs, I would say it's because the other side is not offering better leadership, better packages, or just a direction that is fit that leaders could follow so they can deliver to the people that which they promised they would, given an opportunity to serve. They can do better, but they are not.
All right. Justina, Mudhura says that the bipartisan talks are actually party-centered and not people-centered. That Azimio have actually diverted from their main cause of fighting for the high cost of living, and they're now actually rooting for the electoral reforms and the positions. Do you think this is the case?
It is, because even some of their lieutenants have told us that cost of living ilikuwa inakula. It was the in thing. It was what that was selling. That they've already owned up and told us that. But it goes back to the ordinary citizens. What are you demanding from your MP, your MCA? In fact, I'm telling Kenyans that they are very hypocritical, because the president has said he does not owe counties any money. If he doesn't owe counties any money, we are supposed to be questioning our governors. But Kenyans draw the line. You're very fast to castigate someone who's not your tribesmate, but you cannot talk about your tribesmate. What are they doing on the ground? What are counties doing for you with all the money that they're being paid by the national government? So my blame goes back to the Kenyans, the ordinary citizens, the voters. Sometimes you are made to hate someone because they are not your tribe, but you cannot question your tribesmate. Remember the issue of Siaya and the deputy governor and the governor. So much came out to the public, and we realized that there is misappropriation of funds. But that is where we are drawing the line as citizens. So one, I think the conversation about high cost of living, it is what was selling at the time, and it made sense to Kenyans. However, we need to remember that when the economy is doing badly, people who lost an election, and there were financiers who funded these elections, maybe they're pushing these guys, Azimio, we gave you money. Can you push this government? At least we can have a return on investment. Additionally, most of the people in Azimio say they are lawyers. But right now, the tragedy in this country is that you cannot even afford food. So you can't even be able to retain a lawyer. So they're realizing that, life is hard out here. Let us push for something in government. That is where it's incumbent on me, on any other leader, even Mudhiora, that one day when we're in power, remember that one day you're not going to be in power. How have you made the environment conducive for even you yourself to survive there if you're not in power? So I think it was just something that they always use, and Kenyans forget each and every time. 2007 was there, 2017 was there, 2013 was there, the issues were there. So why did Kenyans think that is going to be different? The idea was Raila Amolo Odinga is given whatever is given. And I've always said, give this man money, give him a job if that's what he wants, because ordinary Kenyans are suffering. Right now they're saying if there's no conversation, they're going back to the streets. What does that mean to the ordinary Kenyan? We're not going to sell, we're not going to have food, and then their lives will continue, but us, we're suffering. So it is better they just kill us quickly by giving him the money he wants, and us, we can continue with our lives.
Well, those are allegations, and we leave them as allegations. Well, moving on, the IBC is not fully constituted.
No.
Why do you think this is the case, and why are we here as a nation?
Well, I'll say the president attempted to follow the processes is laid down. We have procedures according to an act of parliament that was adapted from our constitution. He constituted a panel, of course, almost single-handedly since there were no consultations. This is required of him now that he's president. Azimio have come out and they've said they've rubbished that panel and whatever work it has been doing. So that panel at the moment is sort of on ice. The bipartisan talks have an intersection with regard to reconstituting IEBC. Kenya Kwanza has said, yes, we can talk about how this is going to be redone. So they are willing to rethink what has already happened. My question has been, does Kenya only belong to these two parties? I'll take you back to the 2022 election. For the presidential race, about 14 million people voted for the two top protagonists. 8 million absconded. Before that election, IEBC missed their registration target by about 7 million. So you take 8 and 7, you have 15 million who are not interested in the 2022 general election. Who is talking about these people? Right now, the nation is in disillusionment, given the promises that were made and the steps they are seeing towards the attainment of those promises by the government in charge at the moment. So my prayer is this: let the president and his government be more inclusive. Let them bring to the table all stakeholders. We need the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, the producers at the table. We need the unions involved. We need the clergy. We need basically everyone that has influence consulted so that this process is not left to just the two top politicians. We tried this path before. It was Uhuru and Raila Odinga. The result is we are back where we were in 2018. Let's get it right this time by involving all the stakeholders.
All right, and Justina, right now, Banisa constituents do not have an MP. God forbid, something might happen in another constituency and the same thing might happen again. Why do you think this is not being addressed?
Because of interests and egos. People have forgotten that they are there because of the Kenyan voter. But again, the Kenyan voter fails because, number one, when it's time for campaigns, people vote for the one who has a lot of money. People vote for the one who they feel emotionally attached to, Aliteswa and Uhuru Kenyatta. Issues that are not making sense. Additionally, politics of big spend has messed this country up. When you see, sorry to say, even churches taking Harambee money, some churches, not you guys, some churches taking Harambee money, that goes to influence even how the voters are going to vote. So I think everything these politicians are doing, they feel like we have invested, we have bought your votes, we have bought these positions, so we are going to do things the way we want, forgetting that you're there because of the voter. So what I'm trying to tell the voter, we are the ones who have to change our conversations. Kenyans are saying that this country is not going in the right direction. True. But are they investing in the process? A small party that is growing, are you there to support it from the grassroots? Are you contributing? Because big money spend is what that is messing this country. So we have to first get the politicians out of the conversation for them to know we are here. You're here because of Kenyans, not because you spent your money or you bought the position or whatever. You're there because Kenyans felt that you are fit to lead them. But as it is now, we have to just swallow our poison again and say, let's wait for 2027 and see whether Kenyans are willing to invest in the conversation of transforming this country.
Yeah, Mudhira was saying something.
Well, my lesson has been that Kenyans never quite learn. I see us making the same mistake we've made before. I'll take you back to June 6th, 2022, when my quest to run for President of the Republic of Kenya was quashed by the Independent Elections and Boundaries Commission chair, then Wafula Chebukati. Because Kenyans were not running for president per se, they did not feel the pain They did not see the injustice that was meted on me. So they allowed for it to just be my fight. When in fact, fighting for electoral justice and reforms should have begun then, because I was one out of about 56 other aspirants that were locked out of the process. But because it did not concern a majority, since most had already decided that they were either Kenya Kwanza or Azimio, they never thought that kitakuja kuwaramba. But it has, now that we see maandamano in the streets. This nation belongs to us all. We need to actively participate, engage, because if we don't, the seasoned politicians are already planning the next election and even its outcome. So, yeah.
If I can remember, you actually burnt your voter's card.
Well, what I did at Bombers was start a fire for electoral justice, which I hope is burning hot in the hearts and minds of Kenyans.
Did that signify that you are not going to participate again in any electoral processes?
Because that election, in my opinion, was fraudulent from the very start. I promised myself that I'm going to fight for electoral justice. And should the process not be set up properly, I will not offer myself for any elective position, because otherwise there's no point. But now that there are talks about electoral reforms, I'm deeply involved in it, and I hope it will yield the results that will deliver justice in our elections going forward.
All right. In 4 years' time, we'll be back to the elections. What do you think needs to be done to the IBC?
Number one, if whoever who gets the position should remember they're not there to serve the person who got them there. Let's face it, in this country we have the problem of whatever, if you're given a job by someone, then you feel like you owe that person. For once, let's have someone who will serve the Kenyans. Number two, the conversation on digital economy. I think we need to go further from identification digitally to even how we vote and cast our vote. We all go to a supermarket, and when you pick these pens, everything, they add your prices on the screen. You can see. How about the ballot box has an EPOS, electronic point of reading or scanning the ballot paper. So if Justina is running for president and she's called 001, if you cast your ballot, it reflects in Bomas. So I think we need to also move towards digital economy, artificial intelligence, so that when someone is saying that my votes were stolen, at least we can say this is what was added cumulatively, but you have the ballot paper to verify.
How safe do you think that will be, knowing that just the other day our systems were hacked? How do we...
You know what? This is life. It's trial and error. You can make a mistake and learn. And that is why I always disagree with Muthiora. I tell Muthiora, even if we don't win the election, we would have succeeded in selling a different narrative in this country. Kenyans will start saying, anyway, these guys, we don't have our own ABC, but at least we are putting ourselves out there, and we're trying to change the narrative, because the politics in this country, since I was 5 years old, these are the same guys I've always seen. So why am I not offering myself to have a different conversation in the country? So Muthiora, even if they steal, let us just put ourselves out there. Let us sell a different narrative so that Kenyans can feel, you know what, there's something different. So it'll be their choice whether they want to vote or not. That either way you've offered yourself.
Just to add something, Justina knows this, and those who were in the last election will agree with me that the reason Raila Odinga and William Ruto cannot see eye to eye with regard to that election is because William Ruto knows what Raila attempted to do.
That is?
Raila Odinga knows what Ruto did to be declared winner. That election was never free, it was never fair, and it was never credible. We can do better in future. I hope we do not waste the opportunity in our hands so that no more blood is shed, so that these leaders can get to those top offices.
All right. As you conclude, what do you think is the end game in this talks?
Of course, a handshake from there, which is very welcome from where I sit, because we need to move on as a country. Remember, our bills are not paid by government. We have to live hand to mouth. So I think the faster they give him the handshake or whatever he wants, the better for us. However, I need to leave this clear to everyone. When Uhuru Kenyatta gave out the sword to William Ruto, he had said that he's not going to give a thief. Uhuru Kenyatta was privy to undiluted information in regards to who won the election. So I think the election was free and fair from where I sit, only that maybe there are a few issues like Mudera is saying that he felt like he was discriminated, but from where I sit, William Ruto won the election. The problem I have with him right now and the government is that they are not delivering. He is the one who told us that the CSS don't know what they are doing. They do not know about their ministries. So it goes to say that 1 year later, these guys are not delivering. So I think his issue now, and we have to agree and be fair to him, he won the election, but on delivery, he's losing it.
All right. As we conclude the last your part in short,
Yeah.
Do you think there is hope of electoral justice in these reforms?
Of course, there is hope. We have a very progressive constitution. We have brilliant members of parliament, if only they can put aside their selfish interests. There are pieces of legislation that were brought in towards the tail end of the last parliament. They affected how that election was conducted. If we are going to make any legislations, let's do it in advance so that those who feel aggrieved by whatever will be brought in may have recourse in court. As for the bipartisan talks that are being proposed, I would wish for those in charge to make them more inclusive. Let them bring to the table all the stakeholders.
All the
Nobody
stakeholders.
has monopoly of knowledge
Yeah.
or wisdom. This nation belongs to us all.
All right.
The matter of 2022 election, as unfair as it was, as incredible, it is closed. The Supreme Court pronounced itself on the matter.
Yep.
We have a sitting president, William Ruto. We have a government that is trying to govern. For those who lost, we can fight in future.
So you're
My
going to
lesson
buy again
has
maybe
been,
the next.
as long as we improve the process and there is promise that it's going to be free,
Yeah.
that it's going to be fair, I will be in the race in 2027 because Kenya needs and deserves an alternative. I have always held that the problem we have are the elite politicians. They cannot be part of the solution. And now that I was not able to beat them in 2022, I have learned that if you can't beat them, arrange for them to be beaten.
All right.
So I'm working on that, and I hope God
Yeah.
will keep us safe.
I
All
hope
right,
within
Justina.
the constitution means, my friend, because beating them up is...
You actually did a political divorce.
Yes.
With Wajakoya.
Yes,
2027.
yes.
Are you going to run for this position as president or running mate?
Let's see what the future holds. But the divorce came to highlight the problem we have in this country. Kenyans are so used to something called chauvinistic obedience. So when you push back, Kenyans have a problem. But I told Kenyans, you know what? I will not sit somewhere and deceive you because we were not in Azimio in the first place. We had our own agenda, and that is why we divorced on principle. It wasn't personal, but it was on principle. But I'm happy Kenyans have learned, they've moved away from chauvinistic obedience.
All right. I guess that's a very good.
It's a good point. There's something we should have mentioned.
Yeah.
She believes that if we legalize industrial hemp, we will provide employment opportunities.
Decriminalize.
Yes,
Yes.
decriminalize. And I support that. And I'm taking it in this respect. You see the coffee bushes in Mount Kenya, in Kericho, in Nandi. Industrial hemp could be that.
All right. Oh, okay, I guess that's a good point to end the conversation. Thank you so much, Mudhura Karriara. That has been Mudhura Karriara, if I'm not wrong, party leader at TGN and also a former presidential running mate in 2017, and of course, Justina Wamai, 2022 presidential running mate. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having us.
All right, and with that, it's time to call it quits here on the Dialogue KE on this 7th day of August 2023. On behalf of the whole team that made this broadcast a success, have yourself a blessed night. My name is Kennedy Kimani, and Boniface Morethi has been the sign language interpreter.